Hi, lovely crafty people. This is June from Oakenwich Lane Designs, and on my first YouTube video, I wanted to show you a technique using polymer clay to make very pretty objects that you can use in your house or jewelry. It's called Chopped Translucent, and it's a great way to start using polymer clay if you've never used it before, because you get very beautiful results for very little effort. This is Chopped Translucent Polymer Clay, and I made this little bowl and put it on a little candle stand. I've also made this bowl, and this is my little harvest bowl. I used a stem from one of those mini pumpkins that I got. I took it off the pumpkin and I dried it. And once it was dry, I created this bowl using the chopped translucent clay, and I used this mold, which is just a stainless steel bowl. But I'll show you how to do this in a little bit, or how to mold the clay. This is another piece that I've been working on, and by using some wooden scroll pieces that I bought, glued them together and painted them, and making a chopped translucent little bowl, I'm going to make a very cute Halloween decoration for my house. This technique has also been used to make jewelry, beautiful pieces of jewelry. You can make little earrings, pendants, and I found out about this, how to do this, in a magazine called Polymer Arts. It was the spring 2012. I think you can still get some back issues if you look online. And the person who created this was an artist named Susan O'Neill. I contacted Susan and I asked her if I could show her technique on YouTube, and she graciously said yes. So I'm so happy about that. And I will link her Etsy shop down below so that you can go and look and see some of her other wonderful, unique creations. So let's get started. Let's get crafting some beauty. I'm going to switch the camera down. Be back in a sec. Basically, these are all the supplies that you need to create this technique. You need polymer clay, a clay slicing blade, and some alcohol ink. If you want to make the little bowl on the candlestick, you would have to buy some wooden candlesticks. I bought these on Amazon. They're 3 inches, and you get 3 in a pack. Now let's start talking about the polymer clay. I use Primo, always have. It was recommended when I first started using polymer clay, and I really love it. So I always use Primo Sculpey, and I find that Primo Sculpey has the best texture. It's not too soft and it's not too hard. So I would suggest Primo for this technique. You can try other polymer clays. If you have other polymer clays at home, please go ahead and do so. But if you want to copy what I have done, I use the Primo white translucent clay. Now let's talk about where I get my clay. I buy my clay at a store online called Polymer Clay Express, and they have all sorts of polymer clay supplies and machines and all different clays and different things. So I'd love for you to go over and look at their website. I contacted them also telling them that I'd be doing this YouTube video, and they told me that if you order any clay after watching this video and you put my name in the comments, they will give you 10% off on your entire order. Now I thought that was a really nice deal. I was very, very pleased that he was going to give me that. And their phone number, just so you know, is 1-800-844-0138. But I will give you all of the information on this shop down below. Now this is, I buy it by the pound. And the reason why I buy it by the pound is I use a lot of polymer clay, and it's more cost effective for me to do so. This is what you can usually buy in the craft stores, although they also have this size. It's 2-ounce size at the Polymer Clay Express. I find that with this technique, you're going to want a lot of clay, because once you start it and you see how easy it is to do, you're going to be making all sorts of little bowls and jewelry. The other thing that you're going to need is some alcohol ink. Now I use Ranger alcohol ink. This one happens to be in shell pink because I want to make a pink version of this. But if you don't want to make a little bowl on a candlestick, you don't even need to purchase these. You can use lots of different things around your house to use as a mold as you bake the clay. Now Polymer Clay bakes at 200, this particular brand. Now if you have another brand, please follow the directions that is on the label. But this Primo Clay bakes in your oven at 275 degrees, 30 minutes for every 1/4 inch of clay that you use. Okay, so let's get started, and as we go I'll explain some things, especially if you're a beginner user of Polymer Clay, that you should know. Oh, also, I'm sorry, this is called the carbon steel slicing blade. You could also get this at Polymer Clay Express. I have tried to find it's a rigid blade. It doesn't bend that easily, and it is very sharp on that end. So when you're using this item, always make sure you know what side the blade is on and never pick it up on the blade side. This one is pretty old. I've had this one for years. It's not as sharp. If you decide after watching this video that you want to go further and further and do more research on how to do different things in Polymer Clay, if you need to slice the clay, especially if you do canes, you need a very, very sharp blade. But for this technique, it doesn't have to be that sharp. You can also, I recommend that children do not use this, because this can hurt you, if can cut you pretty bad. They could use the dough scrapers, but once you use something from your kitchen for Polymer Clay, you really shouldn't go back to using it for food. They always say that you shouldn't intermingle what you use with Polymer Clay for food, so I wouldn't do it. But a child can use a dough scraper to chop the clay. Okay, now let's get started. When you're using Polymer Clay, you should always work on a non-porous surface. I usually like to work on glass or a flat, smooth clay tile. I use glass because it's non-porous. You need it for this. Okay, the next thing I always clean my surface before I start working with Polymer Clay, because it picks up everything. Any little speck of dirt, any little speck of dust that you have will be in the clay. Now, when you're doing this, the chopped translucent, it doesn't matter as much. But going forward, if you're starting to sculpt, I use it to sculpt doll figurines, you would like to keep the clay as clean as possible. So I put alcohol, regular rubbing alcohol, not the drinking kind, rubbing alcohol, in a spray bottle. If you don't have a spray bottle, it doesn't matter, just as long as you have some rubbing alcohol. I spray it on the surface that I'm going to use, and I just use a paper towel to make sure it's nice and clean. Also clean my hands, and I definitely try not to wear anything that has a lot of fibers in it that float around. So no Angora sweaters, please. Okay. So, you take your clay, you open up your package, and if you're going to go to the store and only buy a 2-ounce package of Polymer Clay, I'm going to try to mimic that on my pound, so that you could see, for something as small as my little bowl on my pedestal, you don't really need a lot of clay. And I'm going to try to cut straight down. Close enough. I always wrap my clay. People do all sorts of things on how to store it. Basically, I wrap it in the wrapper, and then if I'm not going to use it for a while, I put it in a plastic bag. Now, there's 2 types of translucent clay. Either one works in Primo. This is the white translucent, because I just happen to have it, and I like using the white translucent. Okay, so for the chopped translucent technique, all you have to do actually is chop the clay. Now, if your clay happens to be old and crumbly, that even works better for this technique. And if your clay is too fresh and sticky, all you would have to do is chop it flat and put it between two pieces of paper, again on a non-porous surface, to leach some of the, I think it's called elasticizer, out of the clay. They also say you can put the clay in the refrigerator for a little bit if you need to get it a little bit harder, but this is perfect for this technique. Most of the time when you use polymer clay, you have to knead it, and if you really start working with it, I would suggest getting a pasta machine, because that helps you flatten it and knead it. And there's some other techniques called the Skinner blend that you definitely need a pasta machine for. But this technique is great for just beginners or people who've been working with clay for a while, just to get started, because you really don't need any sculpting ability, and all you need is the clay, the blade, and something to mold it in. So you just keep chopping, trying to get little pieces. I have a food processor that I took out of my kitchen, and I also use that. I have to get another food processor for the food, but I use that, and that chops the clay up very quickly. I just pulse it a couple of times and the clay is all in pieces, but it makes clay that more looks like little pellets. But that's fine for this technique also. If you're doing something like that big harvest bowl, big harvest bowl that I showed you, it's not that big, you're going to have to be using more than 2 ounces. That's why I told you to, or suggested that you go and buy the pound. Oh, and I also wanted to tell you that on the Polymer Clay Express that you would get your 10% off after. They don't have a coupon code or something like that. You just write in the comments, June, my name, and process the order, and then they will give you a 10% refund on your credit card or if you use PayPal. Okay, now that took all of maybe a minute or two to do all of that. Now you have to find a mold to put this in. And what I mean by a mold, it's not a big technical thing. Go around your house, get a bowl, and anything that can go in the oven that is a ceramic or a metal, something metal. Now, the mold that I used for this was a beautiful glass dome. Unfortunately, I was a little too, well, let's put it this way. I wasn't patient enough, and I took it out of the oven and I put it in cold water because I wanted to start working, and the glass broke. So, got a little panicky, and I was running around the house trying to find something that I could use to give me the same shape as that. And the only thing that I could find was the bottom of a candlestick holder. So I took it apart. Now this is metal, so it can go in the oven. And this hole down here was a little too deep, so I took a little piece of tin foil and I smushed it in there. So now I have my mold. Take some of your pieces of clay and you just press it gently but firmly on the sides. Now clay does not stick to metal or glass that easily, especially if you don't if you want it to stick on glass, you have to make sure it covers the glass completely so it stays on there, or if it comes off, you can always glue it back on after you bake it. All I'm doing is taking some of the little pieces and molding it out. And if any, I'm trying to leave a lot of crevices. I hope that you can see this in the video. Probably not, because this is flashing. I see a lot of lights, but I'm trying to leave a lot of crevices. And if something looks a little too solid, I go in there with my blade, cut it, and then press it down. The crevices is where the ink is going to go and make it a little bit darker. And I think that that's so pretty when it comes out. Now you can see that 2 ounces doesn't go far. Just keep taking your clay, gently but firmly, looking at it, seeing if there's any areas that look too whole. And if there's a piece you don't like, use your blade, take it out. Oopsie. There you go. That looks better. Now, if there's some holes left, that's fine, because this is not structural. You're not going to be putting, in that little bowl over there, people are not going to be putting anything heavy in it. You're just going to be putting maybe something, a little treasure, a ring, or some earrings, or just leave it out without anything in it, just so it's a pretty object. Okay, and that basically is it. That's done. Now you can bake it like this and then paint it, or use alcohol inks after it's baked, and I'll show you that. Or you can start having a little fun by putting the alcohol inks on before you even bake it. So I'm just going to move my clay aside for a little bit. Okay. As I said, this is called shell pink. You have to, one of the things about using alcohol inks on polymer clay, especially if you mix it with some rubbing alcohol, is sometimes they turn a different color. They have a lot of blues and a green tone to it, even if you're using browns. And I really don't like that color. So I would test my alcohol ink on my clay before I made my piece. I would do little tests. So as you saw, I just dropped some alcohol ink on my glass, and now I'm going to spray it with a little alcohol, rubbing alcohol. Mix it up, maybe put a little bit more. This is another reason why I like working on glass. I don't use those little palette things. This is so much easier for me. And of course a paintbrush. Use a paintbrush and you just put it on. Trying to see where you would be able to see that better. Over here, there's not so much light. I'm just taking it and putting it on. You could also drip it on. Very lightly, just dabbing it all around. Now, if you wanted to drip it on, just take it and drip. Depending on how dark or light you want it. After you did that, you could also spray it with some alcohol. And what you're really trying to do is get it in those crevices, because that's what makes it so pretty. A little bit more around the edges. And because you have left some holes in your piece, it'll come out on the other side once it's finished baking. See if you can see, I made it a little darker around the top and a little lighter. And you keep going for as dark or as light as you want. Now I'm going to bake this in a, like I said before, 275-degree oven, and I would bake this for 30 minutes. Now some people do not like using their regular oven to bake polymer clay, so they have a separate toaster oven. I've always baked it in my home oven. If I get nervous about it, if there's a lot of pieces, I would take one of those bags that you buy to bake your turkey in and put this in the bag. But you have to put this on a ceramic tile or a Pyrex dish. And if you don't want to cross-contaminate it, just put a piece of foil. It's not that toxic. The only thing you have to be concerned about is if the clay burns. So you want to have a timer, or don't leave your house by accident. Put on a timer for 30 minutes after you put the clay in a preheated oven, and then take it out. You're not going to have any bad effects with that. There's a little bit of a smell, a little bit of a different odor, but it's not that bad. And then after 30 minutes, you turn off the oven. You can leave it in there for a little while to let it cool. Don't get excited like I do and break your glass bowls. And then I guess after about 15-20 minutes with an oven mitt, you take it out of the oven and you can put it under very cold water. Then what you would do is, after it's been in cold water for a while so you don't burn yourself, you have to pry this out a little bit. So gently take a butter knife and just go around and pry it. It should come right out. Now, I've already done 2 different types of this, so I could show it to you. This one right here, and you can see how the clay sort of yellowed, but you could also see through it. I don't know if you can see through it here. Whoops. Here? No. Sorry, camera angle. No. It is translucent. Light does go through it. And it's a very light pink. Here, I baked it first, and then I put some pink on it using the same technique, the ink with a little alcohol. And this I used another, if you see it's very shiny, I used something else called, it's also a product by Ranger, Liquid Pearls. I love using liquid pearls for painting different things. I've also used liquid pearls to paint on fabric. Okay, so I have my candlestick. Oh, I wanted to show you something else. I'm sorry. When you take it out of the mold, the side that you put the clay on is going to come out very shiny. I did not put any polyurethane on that. It's very shiny. While the other side that was baking is dull. Now you can fix that if you wanted to put more ink on this or do other things, and then use a polyurethane, clear satin. I use Minwax polyurethane to coat my pieces. It doesn't make them waterproof, but you're not putting any food in here. You don't serve food on polymer clay. Now, if you make a harvest bowl and you want to put an apple, something you're going to wash afterwards, that's fine. But in the meantime, you don't eat off of anything with polymer clay. They say it's non-toxic, but they also say it's not good for food. So I also had to sand the bottom a little bit because my makeshift mold over there, the bottom was a little bit ripply because of the aluminum foil. And to take this is fine. You're not going to see it when I glue it on the candlestick, so it doesn't matter. But there is some brown or black things that were picked up from the brass mold, some metal, and I'll show you a way to clean that off in 1 second. I use acetone. Acetone is the ingredient in nail polish remover, and a little acetone on a paper towel, and that will take that black off right away. It also takes the shine off. Now when you decide that you love working with polymer clay and you want to start making figurines and paint and do all sorts of things, and you want to add some paint to it, after it's baked, I always go over the piece with acetone. It takes the filmy surface off the clay so that the paint, especially acrylic paint, will stick to it. So now this isn't shiny anymore, but that's fine because by the time I'm done, I will polyurethane it and I'll get the shine back. But you see, this acetone also, if there is fiber or little specks of dirt in your clay, if you rub it, it'll take off a lot of the fiber unless the fiber or dirt is stuck down into the clay. When you're making faces or objects that you just need a little bit cleaner, this will take off any dirt that might have gotten in your clay if it's on the surface. Acetone is very smelly. Nail polish remover is very smelly, and again, I would use caution if I was using it near children. Okay, so I just want to show you some other things on how I put my little bowl on a pedestal together. I got my candlestick. Now this is a wooden candlestick. And before I start to do anything with it, I put 2 coats of gesso on top. First coat, I mixed it with a lot of water because I wanted it to be absorbed into the wood. The second coat was a regular coat without that much water, and so now I felt that you prepared the surface enough so that you can start working with it. Now here's one of the things that I love with the alcohol inks. I'm going to take some gesso, put it right here on my glass mat. And this is great gesso, by the way. This is Stamperia gesso. I bought that at a store called Queen's Craft Fair online. I'm going to add a little water. Very nice and thick gesso. And you can see that there was some pink still in my paintbrush. Didn't clean it. When you use a paintbrush with alcohol inks, you're going to have to clean it in the rubbing alcohol also to really get it out. And now I'm just going to put some ink in my gesso. And so it is tinting it the same color as the ink that I used for the bowl. And then I just paint it. Now you can do this, all of this part, while the polymer clay is baking in your oven. But you're just getting a base coat of pink on here. I'm probably going to have to use a few more coats. And there you go. This is all painted. With the first coat. And you're going to let it dry. Very easy to paint. I'm not sure if you can see the pink color here. I'm trying to see it on the screen. But it's just a very light coat of pink. I can make the pink darker, and I'm going to put another coat on here, at least another coat. But what I wanted to show you is that this really doesn't go together too well. Okay. It's the same tone, but because the clay bakes with a yellowish tone, I can either whiten this up, as I did over here, using the liquid pearls, or I can age this a little bit so it looks like it fits more. But this is going to need another coat, and I'll try putting more alcohol ink into the gesso to make it a little darker. Be back in a sec. Okay, I put another coat of the gesso and I put more ink in the gesso. And I put another coat on here, so we're going to wait for this to dry while we maybe work on this a little bit. What I wanted to tell you is you don't really need to buy gesso. It's great. I have gesso because I use it for other things. But if you have any cheap white craft paint, you can do the same thing. It just should be acrylic, not watercolor. Okay, well that's drying a little bit more. I didn't get to show you, and I wanted to. After the piece is baked, now this one was baked with the pink already on it. If you want to darken it or change the color, you just take your alcohol ink, and you don't have to just use one color of alcohol ink. You could use all different colors. Just make sure that they go together. Again, practice. If you get the pounded clay, you'll have more than enough clay to practice with. And depending on the piece, that little pumpkin bowl, I used a brown, I think it was Latte, Tim Holtz alcohol ink, and Pesto or Meadow. Just darkening the edges a little bit here, maybe putting a little bit more under there. Experiment with this technique. It's fun. You can do it together with your children. And you can, I love the fact that you can make little gifts, and it's not that awfully time consuming. Most of the crafts I do, I'm going to be linking my Etsy shop below. It's going to be a lot of links down there. Most of my crafts are very time consuming. A lot of details. And sometimes I just like to do something that's a tad bit easier. This is why I love always having the alcohol in the spray bottle, and also paper towels. If there was too much and you don't like it, you can remove a little bit of it. Now I'm leaving the back with not as much color because I like the two-tone effect. And I hope this is coming out as pink. It's looking more orange on the screen. Maybe when I upload the video, it'll show a little bit more pink. Now, as I've been doing this, I've noticed that the two pinks really don't match. This one looks a lot more lighter on screen than it is really. And I'm going to take care of that in a little bit. But I do know, because this piece is going to be sort of like a vintage shabby chic little object. But first, before I take care of that, I want to use a little metallic paint to just paint out the ridges. Make it a little bit more interesting, like I did on this piece with the gold. This piece I'm going to use some silver. Now I use Luminaire by Jacquard paint. Whatever metallic paint you want, or if you don't want, that's fine too. This is just the added touch that I used, and I like doing this. Just paint out. Hopefully I'm going to be able to paint out neatly. If not, I can fix it. Just take more gesso and the pink, and if the colors or the tones don't exactly match in the pinks, one's lighter, one darker, that's fine because it's giving more of a vintage look. So I'm just going to paint this silver. Or try to paint this silver as neatly as possible. It's a little funny painting when you're having a video recording, because all of a sudden you can't go in the lines. Now I'm probably going to have to do, well, not probably, I will be doing another coat of this because this paint is a little bit more watery than maybe the paint that you have, and that's okay. I use this paint because it paints very well on fabric, and sometimes I will go shopping for ribbon, and if it's not in the color I need, but I like the design of the ribbon. I just buy it because I know that I can paint it. But with another coat, that'll be just fine. But I don't want you to have to go out and buy this kind of metallic paint. If whatever metallic paint you have, I think you can even use a Sharpie magic marker to do this. And you might not want to use a metallic paint. You might want to use a different color. It's all up to you. I'm just trying to show you different techniques so that it just spurs your creativity to take this, the chopped polymer, translucent polymer, maybe I should get the phrase correct, and do whatever you like with it. That's what Susan's article did for me. I don't usually make jewelry on a whole, but she made some beautiful jewelry pieces. And how she did that was basically you take the chopped polymer clay and you lay it flat, and then you cut out the shapes that you want, and then you make sure that you put a little hole on it so you can put your jump ring through it. Oh, that one came out a little bit better than this one. This one is looking mighty messy. It's okay. We'll straighten that up in a little bit. So you go on, keep going on and painting that. But in the meantime, I'm going to let that dry. I'm going to use some of the clay that I have chopped up over here and just show you how she was doing it. Now, she used a brayer to flatten it out, but because if you're a beginner and I really don't want you having to go out and spend a fortune to get all these tools and supplies, you can do the same thing by just taking your hand and smashing it on the glass. Now, if I was doing this, I would definitely be doing this on my ceramic tile, because then I could just lift it and put it straight in it, just take the tile and put everything in the oven. But I'm not going to get my tile now to show you. You just sort of flatten it out and then cut it whichever way you want. You want to make a pendant, there you go. Different shape. Leave the edges raw on the bottom, and then you just take a pointy tool. Let me see, I think that paintbrush has a little bit of a smaller pointy tool, and of course I wouldn't exactly be using this, but I'm just showing it to you. You just poke a hole right through the clay, twist it around, and there you have a hole, so you can put your jump ring on it. And then you can do, like I said, you could do this before or after. You can dye this now or later, and you don't have to spread it out if you don't want. You could leave it in spots. You can let the alcohol dry so it's darker here, and then you can come in with another color if you want. Be right back again. I'm going to get another color of ink so I can show you that. I got some other colors. I have an orange, a yellow, and I also brought over the latte alcohol ink. These are all Rangers. So say you want to you're making a happy pendant and you want to put a little yellow in there, just drop a little yellow in. Now the yellow does come out a little brown, browner. Spray a little alcohol on it to make it move and blend a little bit more. And then if you want to put a little orange, I would put the orange over here again. It's a very dark color. And then just put some orange in there. And now look, you have a little pretty pendant. I'm not a jewelry maker, as you can see. I don't do jewelry. And then you can also add more of the clay to the sides. It's not baked yet. Clay sticks to clay before it bakes. But after it bakes and you need it to stick together, you'd have to use a little bit of liquid polymer clay. Now this is probably the most ugly pendant you've ever seen in your life, but you get the idea. You use your creativity. Now I'm hoping that I can flip this, yes I can, on the back, and look how the back came out through the holes. That's a pretty side too. If you like that side better, then you can use that side as the pendant. But again, this is your piece. You design it the way you like. Now because I'm spraying alcohol and using alcohol, it will separate a little bit. It won't stick together as easily as it did when it didn't have any of the alcohol ink on it. But this was supposed to be on a clay tile. I was just trying to show you a different technique of what you can use. But I'm going to put that on the side because I'm hoping I could show you earlier. I had told you that sometimes the brown comes out. Some of the colors, browns and the purples, you got to be careful with those colors simply because if you put them on the clay, and I'm hoping this will work. Now that's a beautiful color right there. I love this latte color. It's one of my favorites. But if I spray it with the alcohol, and now it's not going to come out probably, it makes this blue color. It sometimes gets very blue, and this one isn't doing it as much. Okay. Well, you test out your inks, and you make sure on a scrap piece of clay that it doesn't turn this blue color, because it's not a color that bluish green, it's not a color that I really like, especially if I'm trying to go for browns. Some of them do. This is a new latte, so maybe they improved the formula, or maybe it's just not working today, which is fine. Okay, so getting back to my little candlestick, and now you can see my hands are a mess, but just clean off the tile a little bit, the blade. I always, when I'm cleaning off my blade, I put it flat down and I rub the Bounty towel over it. Again, this is very sharp. Please be careful using it. I've heard so many people cut their fingers with it. It's very scary. And always look at it when you pick it up. You don't want to pick it up on the sharp side. The silver needs another coat, so I'm just going to do that. And then I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to show you a technique to age the color a little bit, the entire color. And again, this is a little bit offline here. I'll probably go back while I pause the video just to straighten out these lines a little bit. This is going to be a gift that I'm making, so I would like it to be a little neater. So you paint, you take your time, you paint, and if you make a mistake, again, just take your gesso or your white paint, whatever you're using, your white acrylic paint, and go over and straighten out your lines. But once it gets a little bit darker, it doesn't look as bad. So all told, from beginning to end, the process of doing the candlestick and the clay probably take you about an hour and a half. With a lot of fun. This is fun, even though it may look a little bit like we're struggling to get it done right, but this is fun. And then you have a nice little piece for your house or someone else's. Now I know a lot of beginner videos of polymer clay show you how to make snowmen, and I can do that too. That's really easy. But if you wanted to make something a little bit more unique, this technique would really wow people. I know I had 2 harvest bowls, and I took one into work because where I work in a school, and we had a display case, and they asked me if I would display some of my pieces in there, and one of the ladies fell in love with the bowl. She was so amazed. So when you go pumpkin picking this year, if you want to get a stem, or you could even use a really nice stick, look around you. There are so many things around that you could use. Well, getting back to the original story, she saw the bowl and she loved it so much she wanted it. So she was sweet. She helped me with the display and putting it up and taking it down, and being very patient with me because everything had to be turned just so. But I gave her the bowl just to thank her for all of her hard work. Okay, so I painted another coat of silver around the edges. Gonna wait for this to dry, and then I'll show you how to basically yellow this so that these two, that was cool, these two match. Okay, we're back. Now I waited for this to dry a little bit. As I was waiting, I also put another coat of silver, tried to neaten up the edges, and I also put another coat of the gesso with the alcohol ink just to make it a little bit darker pink. But as you can see, this is a little too bright, and this is more of a vintage yellow type feel. So to help correct that, because I am going for the vintage look, I'm going to take some raw umber. So I just take a little dab of raw umber. Now this happens to be Liquitex, but if you have another brand, that's fine, not a problem. And I'm going to dilute this little dab that I put on my glass with a lot of water, because you just are going to use this like a stain, like a wash. And if this doesn't work, that's fine. That's fine too, because then we could also just repaint it. You won't have to repaint the metallics that much, but you might just have to paint the pink. And that didn't take very long. So I'm hoping this is watered down enough. Keep your paper towels handy. Add a little bit more water to this. And very gently create, well, not gently, just paint the wash over it. Now the more dry, or the drier your gesso is, the better this technique will be. That's why I had to wait a while. And just go over the whole piece, turning it around. This is not meant to be perfect. This is meant to have like I said before, a vintage shabby chic type feel to it. And what I'm doing here is just trying to match up this base with what the clay looks like. Once you have it on, gently go over and blot off any real dark spots. Now this has more of a feel, and it goes better with the translucent polymer clay. Again, it's showing a little bit more orange on my screen, orangey pink, but it is a pink color. You want to add a little bit more to some areas. Makes it look aged, old, not brand new. And if you add a little too much, go in the water, see if you can get some of it off. And again, all these different tones add to more interest, I think, to a handmade item. So I'm going to leave that dry for a little while. Clean up my mess again. I think I did enough antiquing, maybe just a little bit more. Blot it out, just a little bit more over here. It's a little light. Okay. And if I don't like how that came out when it's finished drying, I'll just repaint it. Thank goodness for paper towels. Okay, in the meantime, that's drying. I'm going to take a little of my silver paint, and I'm using the same paintbrush. I'm pretty hard on brushes. I don't go out and buy really expensive brushes because I use them a lot and I use them hard, and sometimes I don't clean them as well as I should. So I don't invest my money. Since I am not a painter, I don't do oil paintings or acrylic paintings for that matter. So I don't invest my money in paintbrushes. They're just a tool for me to use. If I need to go out and get more, I do. So now I just want the edges, lightly on the edges, to have a little bit of that metallic paint. As you can see, fingers are great smushers. I don't know the right term for that, but smusher it's going to be. They blend the paint. You know, one of the things I notice, people have such clean hands when they're crafting. My hands are never clean when I craft. They are always, most times, I just hope I can get the dye out of them. And I also don't have nails. And that's because I cannot keep them clean. And when you work with polymer clay, I find that if I have nails, I stab the clay. And again, it wouldn't be bad in this technique, but when you're sculpting faces, little stab marks don't look so attractive, unless that's the image you're trying to do. So a little silver, a little metallic, and if you were doing this with gold or bronze, go ahead and do the same there. I got a little black speck on this. I don't know what that is, but I'll get it off later. And I'm getting my raw umber on this, but I'll just rub it off. A little water. This does not come off. Once you bake the ink on here, it doesn't come off. Now, when you're doing, especially when you're doing a video, not when you're at home, a heat gun would be very handy so I can dry all the paint really quick. But I don't usually use my heat gun unless I'm using it with polymer clay. So I'm not going to take that out now. We're just going to have to maybe wait for a little bit. In the meantime, what you can do is go around your house and look for little bits and items that you have I have right here, let me shut this properly so I don't spill it and have a silver mess all over the place. I have here a piece of ribbon, and I antiqued it on this side. This side is pure white. This side is a little bit duller, because I believe what I did here was, again, I took some of the alcohol ink and I diluted it with the alcohol, the rubbing alcohol, and just put it on. I just tested it out, see if it would work. It's almost like tea staining, and I like the color, so I was going to be able to use it. When you start buying your craft supplies, and if you have craft supplies and you've been using your crafts for a long time, you already know this, use them in different ways. Try them out, especially with this technique with the chopped translucent. I should just be calling it CT because sometimes it's really hard to say that. But with the chopped translucent, get a little test. Do a little test on your before you decide to make something from it. Test it out, put the ink on before, test it out by putting the ink on it afterwards. If you want, go out and buy different colors. That's up to you. But what the good part about this is you can have fun, you can explore, and you can create different things. And that's what it's all really about. I'm hoping this is dry enough right now. And how I attach this to this is just with some super glue. Now I use Gorilla super glue gel, and you have to shake that up. They tell you to, after you shake it up, go like that so the gel gets down in the bottom. I find that this works really well to hold them together. I don't use hot glue because hot glue and polymer clay really don't work too well together. So I prefer using just some super gel. I also use a lot of fabric tack in my work, but that's for other things. And I'll show you in a little bit what I use my fabric tack for. Also, with all of these super glues, if you get them on your fingers and your fingers get stuck, the acetone or the nail polish will help dissolve it. That's the only thing that I know, and believe me, I've had my hands stuck more times than I can count. Just I put the super glue on this, line it up with the bottom. You have a few minutes to work, and just let it sit. So use the acetone, or if you don't have acetone, nail polish remover works well. Acetone is the main ingredient in nail polish remover. They just, I think, add some nice scent to it. But this should set up very quickly. Now, adding that raw umber wash has really made the two pieces, the polymer clay and the wooden candlestick gel. They look more like they're in line with each other. Now, on this one, what I did was, because you can see the groove where they're joined, I hit it a little bit by just wrapping the top with some ribbon. And then I went around. I've had some paper roses, a ribbon, some of these pearls on a string, or really on thread, or fishing line, stiff fishing line, and just glued together on here a little decorative pieces together. So this would be a pretty little bow. I'm going to show you how I glued the ribbon on, and then I'm going to pause the video and finish this piece up. This is fabric tack. It's one of my favorite glues. It almost reminds me of hot glue with all the webs that come off of it, but I love working with it. And A lot of people say after a while when they use fabric tack that it gets very gooky and it's very thick. And a way to thin it out is by also using the same product, the acetone, which you can get in hardware stores, and just put a little bit in it. And you put some in and you shake it up, and that'll thin out your fabric tack. Now this doesn't have a label on it simply because I use this quite a bit. I buy fabric tack in bigger bottles and pour it in. I find that works better for me. It's more cost effective, and it's easier for me to hold a smaller bottle than that big gunky thing and trying to put the glue where I want it. So sometimes you got to clean the nozzle, and if the glue gets stuck, which it will probably do today because I didn't check it out before I went on, you just might have to put a little pin in there. Hold on, I have a scissors, which I shouldn't be using these scissors for. It's my fabric scissors, but just clean it out. Here we go. So I'm just putting a little bit of glue right around the edge. If it gets too much, fabric tack works on a lot of different surfaces than just fabric, but once it's dry, it's pretty darn permanent. Okay, put this down. Let me see. I'm going to trim this piece off. Lay this down. And you're trying to take the edge of the ribbon, or whatever ribbon you have, and get it right in the crevice where these two meet. Pull it a little bit, and I believe I can cut it right about there. Make sure it's glued, the fabric is touching the glue. When you put fabric tack down, another little secret, especially if you're using very porous fabrics, is put it down on not the outside part. If you're trying to do like a hem, put it down and put it on the side that you're hemming up, and wait for it to dry just a tad so it's not so wet. And then when it gets to its tacky stage, then you put the hem together with the piece that's going to show on the outside. That way the fabric tack will not go through the fabric, the good side of the fabric, and create a mark, a dark mark on your fabric. So I glued the ribbon. I'm going to work on this piece just a little bit more to add some bits and some decorative pieces, and then I'll come back and I'll show it to you. I might fix up the paint a little bit, add some more colors. I might even add some of that liquid pearls in ballerina, which is what you see, this bright color over here, a little white to it. I might just add that too. But I'll finish this piece and I'll come back and I'll show you how far I've got accomplished. Now, one other thing. I am going to decorate this. Usually you put the seam to the back, but I'm going to decorate all of this right in the seam area. Because when you start putting all of your decorative pieces, the seam is not going to show. And I think it looks better that way than having the seam on the back. All the back has is the ribbon showing. Okay, so I'm going to go do that. I'll be back in a couple of seconds. And you work on your creation however you want. Well, I finished my little piece. I found a little ribbon that I ripped up a little bit and a little paper rose. And I did a little bit more painting. I'm a little bit of a fussy painter, so I did a little bit more painting on the candlestick part. And then I did add some of the Ranger Liquid Pearls in Ballerina. And that, wait, look at it. Okay, there we go. To the top and the bottom, just to give it, besides the antiquing of the raw umber, the liquid pearls just added like a white pearly tone to it, and it really looks pretty. I'll be very happy to give this as a gift. And as you can see, that you can really see how translucent the clay is now by looking at it through the light that's coming up from above. And you can also tell here because you can see the center. It's really very, very pretty. A wonderful technique. So I would like to really thank Susan O'Neill for letting me share this with you. So whether you would like to do a little Halloween decoration or some harvest bowls, and you don't have to make it a harvest bowl. You could just make it a bowl and put pastel colors in it and use it for springtime. Or you could just put the polymer clay, smash it flat on your baking tile, and just make square little plates that you can put anything on. Just go around your house. You can make wonky molds out of the bottom of candlesticks. Use a metal bowl if you have one, if you want to go and purchase one, or just use a regular glass bowl that you have. There's Pyrex bowls that you can buy that are very good to put in the oven, or a glass bowl that you have. Just don't use any china. And if you use a ceramic bowl or a plate that you want to continue to eat food off of, just cover it with tin foil before you put the clay on it. That way the clay is not on the plate and you'll feel comfortable about using the plate afterwards for food. I'd also like to thank, once again, Polymer Clay Express. They're going to give you 10% off if you put my name in the comments, and there you can find the pounds of clay that you're going to need if you really want to get involved in this clay, and also the rigid clay blade. I don't know if I said it before, but I don't think the craft stores have the rigid clay blades. I think the blades that you get there are very flexible, and for this technique the rigid blade is so much better. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you try this technique. It's a lot of fun, and until I see you again, have fun creating some beauty.